Jacob Christopher Tito Ortiz, born January 23, 1975, is an American semi-retired mixed martial artist. In the MMA world, he is known for his stints with the Ultimate Fighting Championship (UFC), where he is a former light heavyweight champion, having held the title from April 14, 2000 to September 26, 2003, and Bellator MMA. Along with fighters like Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell, he was one of the sport's early stars. Ortiz ultimately became the biggest pay-per-view draw of 2006 for his fights with Liddell, Forrest Griffin, and Ken Shamrock. Outside of his fighting career, Ortiz is the CEO of the Punishment Athletics MMA equipment and clothing line. He also owns an MMA training gym called Punishment Training Center, which is located in his hometown of Huntington Beach, California. On July 7, 2012, Ortiz became the 9th inductee into the UFC Hall of Fame. Ortiz was born in Huntington Beach, California, where he lived until he moved to Santa Ana, California at the age of 5. He is the son of Joyce and Samuel Ortiz. His father is of Mexican descent and his mother is of English ancestry and was born in Hilo, Hawaii. Ortiz was given the nickname Tito by his father at the age of 1. Ortiz has 3 older half-brothers from his mother's first marriage to Louis Simmons. Ortiz had a difficult childhood. Both of his parents were addicted to heroin, while Ortiz was involved with street gangs, was placed in juvenile halls, and used drugs such as cocaine and PCP. His parents divorced when he was 13 years old, and his mother took the young Ortiz with her back to Huntington Beach. When he was only 7 years old, Ortiz supported himself by selling fish that he caught at a local pier and later attended Huntington Beach High School, where he began wrestling during his sophomore year. He excelled at the sport, winning a SIF championship at 189 pounds, and finishing 4th in the state tournament as a senior. When Ortiz was 18 years old, his mother kicked him out of the house and he began living with one of his brothers while doing labor work, and later became addicted to methamphetamines. At the age of 19, Ortiz ran into an old high school wrestling coach, a future UFC fighter and the head wrestling coach at Golden West College, Paul Herrera, who encouraged him to enroll in the college. Ortiz then began attending Golden West, where he was a California Junior College state champion and All-American for 2 consecutive years before transferring California State University at Bakersfield, where he continued wrestling but was never a full-time starter. Ortiz also trained with UFC fighter and fellow collegiate wrestler, Tank Abbott. Ortiz's mixed martial arts debut was at UFC 13 in 1997. Still in college, Ortiz competed as an amateur for no prize money or contracts. He beat Wes Albritton in an alternate bout by referee stoppage at 0:31 of the first round. He was selected to face Guy Mesger in the light heavyweight final after Enson Inoue could not continue due to injury. Despite dominating Mesger at first, Ortiz lost the fight at 2:00 in the first round by a guillotine choke submission. After returning with a TKO victory over Jeremy Screeton at West Coast NHB Championships 1, Ortiz fought top-ranked fighter and UFC 12 light heavyweight tournament champion Jerry Bullander at UFC 18. Ortiz dominated the fight and won via TKO due to cut stoppage. Ortiz then avenged his loss to Mesger at UFC 19 by TKO. Ortiz's post-fight antics towards Mesger and the Lions Den led to his long-running rivalry with the team's leader Ken Shamrock. Ortiz has credited UFC heavyweight champion Ba Rutten for inspiration during his early days. Ortiz said, "I looked up to Ba Rutten. Ba was my idol. People were just so scared of fighting him. He was like the man. I thought that was what I need to do now. If I train as hard as he does, then one day I'll be as good as him, and 2 years later look where I am. I'm on top of the world. I'm got to say thanks to him, Ba, for helping me out by making me believe in dreams." In 1999, Ortiz fought Frank Shamrock for what is now known as the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship at UFC 22. Despite controlling Shamrock for the majority of the fight, Ortiz ended up losing via submission due to strikes. Following the victory, Shamrock retired and vacated the championship. The middleweight division was then officially renamed the light heavyweight 205 pounds division, and Ortiz was chosen along with Vanderlei Silva as a top contender. Ortiz defeated Silva for the vacant light heavyweight championship at UFC 25 via unanimous decision. He went on to defend the light heavyweight championship a record 5 times in the following 3 years, defeating Yuki Kondo, Evan Tanner, Elvis Sinosik, Vladimir Matyushenko and Lions Den head Ken Shamrock at UFC 44. After a near-year-long layoff from the sport, Ortiz fought the new interim light heavyweight champion Randy Couture, who had defeated Chuck Liddell for the interim title at UFC 43 in September 2003. Couture defeated Ortiz via unanimous decision. The loss ended Ortiz's near 3.5-year title reign, which was the longest light heavyweight championship reign until John Jones won his 6th victory while maintaining the light heavyweight championship on September 21, 2013. Following his loss to Couture, Ortiz faced Chuck Liddell at UFC 47, losing by TKO in the second round. After 6 months off, Ortiz returned and took a unanimous decision victory over newcomer Patrick Court at UFC 50 and a split decision over Vitor Belfort at UFC 51. In February 2005, Ortiz took time away from the UFC and was offered deals with several promotions including Pride Fighting Championships and the Don King-backed World Fighting Alliance. Ortiz and fellow fighter Fabiano Iha even hired investment banker Stan Medley to take a new league, the Extreme Fighting Championship, public, but none of these endeavors came to fruition. Ortiz opted to try his hand at professional wrestling, signing with Total Nonstop Action Wrestling as a guest referee. In November 2005, UFC President Dana White announced Ortiz and Ken Shamrock would coach the Ultimate Fighter 3 reality TV series on Spike TV, which premiered in April 2006. Ortiz's first fight in his return occurred at UFC 59 on April 15, 2006 against previous The Ultimate Fighter 1 winner Forrest Griffin. Ortiz won via split decision. 3027, 2829, and 2927. His next fight was against UFC Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock at UFC 61 on July 8, 2006, a match which was to conclude a main rivalry on The Ultimate Fighter 3. Shamrock lost in the first round by TKO due to strikes elbows by Ortiz. On August 25, 2006, at the UFC 62 weigh-ins, Dana White announced a rematch between Ortiz and Shamrock for October 10, 2006, on Spike TV, as the main event of Ortiz vs. Shamrock 3, the final chapter. Ortiz beat Shamrock for the third time in this fight, which was stopped in the first round due to strikes. On December 30, 2006, at UFC 66, Ortiz rematch with Chuck Liddell for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship ended in defeat via referee stoppage in the third round. He then fought against undefeated The Ultimate Fighter 2 winner Rashad Evans on July 7, 2007, at UFC 73. Ortiz took charge of the fight from the outset, taking Evans down and controlling him. In the second round, Ortiz once again took control and nearly submitted Evans before the culmination of the round. The fight ended in a draw after Ortiz was penalized for grabbing the fence. Ortiz's last fight on his contract with the UFC was a unanimous decision loss to the then undefeated Lyoto Machida at UFC 84 on May 24, 2008. All 3 judges scored the fight 3027 to Machida. Ortiz came close to submitting Machida in the third round with a triangle choke before transitioning to an armbar. However, Machida managed to escape and survived the round, winning a unanimous judges' decision. The fight concluded Ortiz's stay with the promotion as he chose not to resign, citing his frustration with UFC President Dana White as a major factor in the decision. After leaving the UFC, Ortiz was approached by multiple promotions, including the now-defunct Elitex, Affliction and the American Fight League. However, a clause in his old UFC contract forbade him from signing with or fighting for any other organization until approximately April–June 2009. Until his return to the UFC, Ortiz was considered the biggest free agent on the market. On October 6, 2008, Ortiz underwent back surgery in Las Vegas, Nevada. According to his website, he had been experiencing back pain since his fight with Randy Couture. Wednesday, December 17, 2008, Affliction Entertainment announced that Ortiz would be part of the broadcast team for the Affliction Day of Reckoning. Ortiz had said he would fight again in August 2009, but this did not occur as part of his comeback to the UFC. Ortiz began training with his original Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo instructor Kleber Luciano, a student of Royler Gracie. Ortiz originally briefly trained with Luciano back in 1997 when he was still a student at Golden West College. On July 17, 2009, both Ortiz and Dana White stated that the pair had made amends. 1 week later, White announced that he resigned. Tito Ortiz stated he is returning for a 6-fight deal he and White have worked out. White officially announced Ortiz's return in a conference call on July 3, 2009. White mentioned that everyone wants to see Tito fight and Tito will retire in the UFC. Mark Coleman was named as Ortiz's opponent for his return to the octagon at UFC 106. However, Coleman pulled out of this bout due to a second-degree tear of his MCL and was replaced by Forrest Griffin due to an illness. To UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar. Ortiz's fight with Griffin was promoted to the headliner of UFC 106. Griffin won the fight via split decision, showing superior striking ability whilst Ortiz was able to secure takedowns in the first and second rounds. Griffin showed considerable improvement since their first fight and kept the fight standing throughout the third, leading to the split decision victory. On December 5, it was announced Ortiz would coach the 11th season of The Ultimate Fighter, with the opposing coach being Chuck Liddell. He was scheduled to fight Liddell again for the third time at the end of the season and later pulled out of the bout. On April 7, 2010, UFC president Dana White said Liddell vs Ortiz 3 was scheduled to be the main event for UFC 115. However, on April 12, 2010, the UFC confirmed the main event for the card was Liddell vs Rich Franklin. Ortiz fought Matt Hamill on October 23, 2010 at UFC 121. Hamill was Ortiz's first overall pick during Season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter. Ortiz lost the fight via unanimous decision. UFC president Dana White hinted at Tito Ortiz's possible release from the UFC in a post-fight interview after UFC 121, stating that we all know what happens when guys lose 4 fights in the UFC. There had been no official statement to confirm this. However, on November 7, in a response to a fan via his Twitter, Ortiz stated that he would again fight in the UFC. Ortiz was expected to face Antonio Rogrio Nogueira on March 26, 2011 at UFC Fight Night 24. UFC president Dana White said that he had expected to cut Ortiz loose from the UFC after his loss to Hamill, but decided to give him one last chance against Nogueira. Ortiz received a cut above his eye and a concussion while training for his fight with Nogueira and was forced to withdraw. He was replaced by Phil Davis. Ortiz took on Ryan Bader on July 2, 2011 at UFC 132, coming in as a heavy underdog with his UFC career on the line. Despite stating that in his previous 5 fights had been plagued by injury, Ortiz dropped Bader with strikes and submitted him using a guillotine choke at 156 of the first round, thus securing his first victory since 2006 and saving his UFC career. The victory earned him submission of the night honors and a rematch against Rashad Evans on August 6, 2011 at UFC 133, in which he replaced an injured Phil Davis on 2 weeks' notice. Ortiz lost in the second round by TKO via strikes despite nearly finishing Evans in round 1 with a guillotine. Ortiz faced Antonio Rogrio Nogueira on December 10, 2011 at UFC 140. He lost the fight via TKO in the first round. He would state after the fight that he had suffered a neck injury before the fight but decided to fight anyway in the hope of bringing the fans a victory. Ortiz then stated he would retire after his next fight, the last of his contract against Forrest Griffin at UFC 148. Ortiz faced Forrest Griffin for a third time on July 7, 2012 at UFC 148. Ortiz was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame prior to his final bout. He lost in a fight of the night winning performance despite landing 2 knockdowns and 2 takedowns to Griffin's 0. Griffin once again was able to outstrike Ortiz for the victory. On April 26, 2010, Ortiz was arrested for felony domestic violence against then-wife Jenna Jameson at their Huntington Beach, California home. Jameson was photographed afterward that day with a bandaged arm, amid accusations by both parties against each other, with Ortiz accusing Jameson of being erratic and addicted to OxyContin, while she alleged that he was abusive. Both later recanted the allegations. Ortiz was arrested on DUI charges in Los Angeles on January 6, 2014. He was sentenced to 3 years probation, an undisclosed fine, and an obligation to enroll in an alcohol education program. On July 31, 2013, it was announced that Ortiz would come out of retirement to face former training partner and fellow former UFC light heavyweight champion Quinton Jackson on November 2, 2013 at Bellator 106. However, on October 25, it was announced that Ortiz suffered a neck injury and had to pull out of his fight with Jackson. Despite having to deal with another injury, Ortiz said that he would still focus on a return to the cage, and Bellator president Bjorn Rebney said that they still wanted to see Ortiz compete in their organization. Ortiz faced Bellator middleweight champion Alexander Shlemenko in a matchup at light heavyweight in his Bellator debut on May 17, 2014 at Bellator 120. He won via first-round arm triangle choke submission. In his victory speech, he was dismissive of the UFC for the company's attempts to remove him from their history, calling it bullshit, and stated that he will live in the MMA memory forever. Ortiz faced fellow UFC Hall of Famer Stephan Bonnar on November 15, 2014 at Bellator 131. He won via split decision. On June 19, 2015, it was announced that Ortiz would face Liam McGeary for the Bellator light heavyweight championship. The match eventually took place on September 19, 2015 at Bellator 142. Dynamite won. Ortiz lost the fight via inverted triangle choke in the first round. In his fourth fight for the promotion, Ortiz faced fellow UFC veteran Chael Sonnen on January 21, 2017 in the main event at Bellator 170. Before the fight, Ortiz announced this would be his last mixed martial arts fight. He won via rear-naked choke in first round. In August 2018, it was announced by Golden Boy Promotions that Ortiz would face his rival Chuck Liddell in a third fight. The fight is scheduled to take place on November 24, 2018 at the Forum in Inglewood, California. Ortiz was married to his first wife, Kristen, for 5 years. They have a son, Jacob. In 2006, he began dating former adult film star Jenna Jameson. He cancelled a November 12, 2006 appearance as the guest of honor at the United States Marine Corps birthday ball at the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar in San Diego, when the Corps refused to let him bring Jameson as his guest. On November 30, 2006, in an interview on The Howard Stern Show, Ortiz stated that he was in love with Jameson, that she was no longer acting in pornography, and that they were in a monogamous relationship. Ortiz announced in August 2008 that he and Jameson were expecting twins in April 2009. On March 16, 2009, Jameson gave birth to twin boys, Jesse Jameson and Journey Jet. Jameson and Ortiz split up in March 2013. Ortiz was granted full custody of the twins.